Good afternoon to all the people who are connecting through our live on Facebook and YouTube, and to those who join us from Google Meet session as well. My name is María Betancourt, and I'm a partner in the association in Kiwe. I'm also an environmental engineer and very passionate through all this community work and peace engineering matters. Before I introduce Mira Olson, I would like to clarify a little things and some rules. As I already mentioned, we are doing a live streaming through Facebook and YouTube. And if at any time it cuts due to internet failures, do not worry. The conference will be uploaded in YouTube platform after the end of the session. This will be subtitled in Spanish and English for accessibility very soon. We thank to everyone who is joining from Google Meet room and ask them to turn off their microphones and cameras while Mira is speaking and having their presentation. When you speak, activate the microphone, please. The use of camera is entirely on your choice. If you want to make an intervention or to make it deleted, you can write to us of our means or contact, and will be removed from the final video. And finally, but very important to remind, this is a space for dialogue and respect. And so here we are with Mira Olson, who is an associate professor in the Civil and Architectural and Environmental Engineering Department at the Drexel University. She also holds a bachelor degree in Mechanical Engineering and Environmental Science Engineering from the Rice University, and also a master and Ph.D. in Civil Engineering from the University of Virginia. Her focus right now is in the research of protecting source water quality, and has current interest in transboundary water management and community-based research design. Mira is also an editor from the International Journal of Engineering, Social Justice and Peace, and has served as faculty fellow in the Drexel University and Community Partnership. She's a director from the newly established Peace Engineering program at Drexel. I don't know if Mira would like to add some other information about herself.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, everyone. So I guess I will start. I want to introduce myself and some students that came along with me. I'm going to share screen for to begin with, and then open it back up to the students. Can everyone see that? Okay. Well, thank you for inviting me here. I've long admired the work that you do, and so I'm really excited to have the opportunity to have this discussion. So I'm director of the Peace Engineering program at Drexel University. I wanted to, this is the poster that you put out. It's such a beautiful graphic that I wanted to use this to introduce the work that what we're going to talk about. So I've brought with me two students and one graduate of the Peace Engineering program at Drexel. And we just wanted to talk a little bit about how we've purposefully brought community partnership into engineering our curricula and then our research opportunities. So I'm going to stop sharing for a second and let the students introduce themselves. They'll talk more later, but just a little bit about who they are and what they're working on. So Savannah, do you want to go first?
I knew you were going to ask me to go first. Yeah, so thanks for having me on as well. I'm happy to be here. So I am kind of the first graduate of the Peace Engineering program. I graduated last December. I come from a non-traditional engineering undergraduate experience also at Drexel, where I was interested in civil and environmental engineering, but also public health and global studies, all with this kind of overlay of sustainability. Yeah, so I'm interested in things as they relate to fundamental human needs. So they overlap a lot with things like critical infrastructure, so food, water, land. And I've spent a lot of time thinking about engineering and maybe non-traditional engineering spaces kind of along the conflict curve. So thinking about like humanitarian settings and stuff like that. yeah, I'm also interested in sustainability. Obviously, I just started a new position as a sustainability engineer at a national lab here. Yeah, so it's a little bit about me.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess we'll go with seniority in the program. So Aaron, up next.
Hi, yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm Aaron. I am currently in the Peace Engineering program at Drexel University. My background is not in engineering, it's in chemistry with my undergrad. And then I joined Drexel in their chemical engineering program, but I took some elective courses for peace engineering and I really liked it. And then so I joined the program when I learned about it. And I thought it was really cool because, it combines a lot of different disciplines. So you have the technical focus, which for me is environmental engineering. And then you have like the whole social dimension to it, which I'm focusing on public health. And my current work in the peace engineering program here combines the two, engineering and public health. I'm working on gun violence research in Philadelphia. So yeah, that's me.
Yeah, I will say it does take a concerted effort to find this program, or either a deliberate turn to sort of try to merge your technical and your social interests. So it's interesting how everyone found peace engineering. So Elliot, do you want to say hello as well?
Yeah, of course. My name is Elliot. As Mira said, I'm relatively new to the Peace Engineering program. I'm also pursuing a undergrad degree in engineering at Drexel University. My sort of background and interests really revolve around sort of sensor and Internet of Things technology, especially where those activities intersect with forestry and environmental protection. And as a really cool part of the Peace Engineering program, I've been able to work with a startup that I have actually co-founded called Outland Analytics. And we're basically working to roll out a system that provides real-time notifications of illegal logging. So the Peace Engineering program is sort of a really interesting endeavor for me where I can blend sort of technical development with an on-the-ground problem. And so far it's been great.
Thank you. So we'll hear more from them in a little bit, and I will start sharing slides again. Okay. Okay, so I thought we'd start by just all of us thinking about what the purpose of engineering is. So engineering is designed to meet the needs of society. So it's the use of scientific principles to design things and build things, where the things can be buildings or machines or processes or devices, but they're all to meet the needs of society. However, the process has often looked much like this, where the designing and the building happens at universities or in labs or in industry, and then it gets rolled out into society. And certainly there have been undeniable advances to society through engineering. I'm not going to go through all of these, but certainly we've had a lot of advances through engineering, research, and design. Yet, despite all that, we're kind of left with a bunch of questions. Despite our ability to take dirty water and make it clean enough to drink, and our ability to not only discover, but then harness and deliver electricity, we still have to ask ourselves why 2 billion people still lack access to safe drinking water, and why 1 billion people don't have electricity, and why 65 million people are displaced from their homes around the world, despite knowing how to build homes and shelters, and why 25 million people in the United States still lack broadband internet access. And so is this a fault of the technology? No, because the technology does work for some people. It's in the access. And so if we think of the role of the engineer as the one who designs and builds, but doesn't take that process to the delivery out to the people, then it's correct in thinking that they've done their job. But if we think about the engineer as someone who's supposed to meet the needs of society, there's a gap there. And so some of our engineering is not meeting the needs of societies. So we have these questions of why. Why is that so? And we have questions also about what we're doing when we put it out in the world. What are some of the uses and unintended consequences of the engineering that we design and put out there? Were we able to anticipate the pollution that would be generated from combustion and transportation, or the health effects from the chemical industry, or in some of the inequities in access to infrastructure or services? We're seeing that very clearly right now in the United States looking at broadband access to internet. So whereas that might have been a divide before COVID, where certainly there were inequities in who had access to internet in the home, it was still such that people went to schools and outside buildings to get their education. And then now in this COVID area where people are getting their education from home, that introduces a whole nother level of disparity and inequities in access not only to the internet, but to education in general. And so we have to think about what the consequences of our designs and who we get them to are. And then if we're thinking along those lines, we have to start asking how. So how do we better align engineering so that it protects the environment and it serves to promote social justice and it's protective of human rights and it promotes peace? And so that question, that how do we do that, is kind of what peace engineering is all about. So peace engineering is realigning engineering, both the education and the practice of it, in the support of the environment, in support of social justice, in support of human rights and peace. And so how we take that definition of engineering and we redo it and we say, all right, if we're looking at what peace engineering is, then we redefine it's still the applications of science and technology to build things, those same things, but it's in support of conditions for peace. And it's not always an easy thing to define peace. One of the definitions that I like is from Rob Rosigliano. Oops, sorry about that. Oh, I dropped that on my phone. Hold on 1 second. We have a landline. Okay. So one of the definitions that I like comes from Rob Rosigliano, and he defines peace as kind of a state of a human existence that's characterized by sustainable levels of development. So that technology and that innovation, so everything that we think about with engineering, but characterized by a sustainable level that is not only within sustainable means, but also that is supportive of healthy processes of societal change. So this gives us a definition of engineering and some clear engineering goals that are a bit broader than what we might be used to as engineers. And clearly there needs to exist a whole ecosystem for peace engineering to permeate throughout the world. And some of it is technical and some of it is not. So it needs to fit within political and economic and social structures as well. And I'm not going to go into all of that here today, although I really do think the intersection that creates this ecosystem that supports peace technology and peace engineering is probably worth another webinar. What I did want to focus today is one very specific example of how we're trying to change engineering education to a model that can be more supportive of some of those questions that we're asking. So if we can take just that engineering design process, whereas normally it's within the labs and the universities and then rolled out to society, if we can take that and if we can pivot it, and if we can pivot it to a more partnered model, and that's, I know, the focus of much of the work of this group. So if we can bring in participatory methods and a partnered model that couples engineering research and education and engagement. And that's what we've been trying to build into the Peace Engineering program at Drexel. So I'll talk a little bit about how we built this into our curriculum. And then I'll ask some of the students to talk about how they've experienced that through their research or through their experiential learning. So the program at Drexel was developed. It's a master's degree program in peace engineering, and as far as I know, it's the only one that exists. So we developed this in collaboration with the U.S. Institute of Peace, which sits in Washington, D.C. under our State Department. And it was developed in response to a real identified need to increase science and technology in the work that they do, which is diplomacy and development and disaster response. But not having the people that were trained to do that with both the technical skills and the understanding of that complex system in which they sit. So we partnered with the U.S. Institute of Peace, and then more specifically the Peace Tech Lab, which is an NGO spinoff off of the U.S. Institute of Peace. And they really focus on people and communities who are affected by conflict. And so their goal is to use technology, media, and data to accelerate peace building efforts. And so peace building efforts, we know, are local, they're participatory, and they somewhat align with engineering processes that are participatory and stakeholder driven. But to be honest, the large engineers' goals of being able to scale and roll things out, and then the small scale and local and deliberate and participatory methods of peace building don't always align. So honestly, it was some work to think about the areas of overlap between the two as we were building our program, but it was really important for us to align the needs of the peace building community with the peace engineering program that we were developing. So since we were coming from those two different angles, we kind of ended up with two goals. The first being to improve peace building practices around the world by integrating technology and engineering analysis into their practice. And then the second was to reimagine engineering. So to realign engineering with those peaceful outcomes by infusing a conflict sensitivity and participatory methods into the engineering design process. And that's really what our curriculum was built around. So how do we introduce that into the engineering process so that we can align our goals with some of those outcomes of peace and social justice and environmental protection? So I think it's clear why we as a world need to work to support conditions of peace. In the absence of peace with conflict, it drives 80% of the humanitarian needs in the world. It's the leading cause of hunger and famine and all these really pressing societal and global challenges. So I won't belabor those, but I will admit that it sometimes is hard for engineers to understand their role in working for issues of peace. So what is the role of the technically trained engineer in working in support of peace and environmental protection and social justice? And so that's been something that we struggle with as engineers. So what is our role in sort of these societally complex problems? And one thing that I'll just mention is that as the world, as engineering and sort of governments and industries are increasingly aligning themselves with the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which are listed here on the list, you're probably familiar with them. But so ending poverty and good health and well-being and clean water and sanitation, there's the clear need for engineering skills and work in each and every one of those. But the number one thing we learned from the precursor to these SDGs, which was the Millennial Development Goals, is that their progress was absolutely impeded by conflict. So in regions of the world where 2 billion people live, in states where they're affected by fragility and conflict and violence, it just is not possible to advance those sustainable development goals. So if those are now the priorities of governments and industries and businesses are all getting behind those, we are going to have to work in support of peace, and we're going to have to figure out how to engineer and work definitely with different outcomes that do support peace and access and accessibility and social justice. So the issue is that engineers are going to have to work in this space. And so it takes a rethinking of the role of the engineer. It takes introducing those questions of why. Why do some people have access to the technology we designed and why do some people not? And the what am I putting out into the world and how it's going to be used? And then the how do I better align? It's going to take the engineer to tackle those questions as their own and to figure out both how to infuse sort of a conflict sensitivity into their own work and an intentional design such that things are used for peace rather than for malicious means. But then it also sometimes places engineers working in social problems where they are maybe a little uncomfortable. And I think you'll hear some of that from some of these partnered projects that the students are working on. They're working in gun violence or looking at impacts of war on civilians where they might not immediately see the need for engineering skills, but it really takes that partnership. It takes working with community partners and working with people who are going to use technology and engineering and working together as teams in a partnered approach. So I'm going to stop for a minute and let the students sort of describe a little bit more about their work, their partnered work, and either their research or their experiential learning, and how it's sort of shaped the way that they approach their work and a different approach to engineering. So I think maybe we'll go in the same order of seniority, which means Savannah is up first.
That sounds good. Thanks, Mira. I think for me, the core of what peace engineering is and kind of my interest in engineering is this contextual engineering approach. And to do anything with good context, and by good, I mean like in a way in which it can be utilized effectively, you need other value systems to be brought into that equation. We all have our own experiences and biases, and that impacts our work no matter kind of where we sit and what kind of engineering we're doing. And so I love that definition of peace. I don't know why I've never seen it, because that's kind of my two interests combined, like sustainability and peace in a really big way, and thinking about human rights and social justice issues. But I think on a smaller scale, peace can also be defined as the constructive management of conflict. And I think more often than not, engineers deal with conflict just in maybe ways that we don't talk about in terms of conflict. We talk about trade-offs, we talk about different value systems, and we maybe talk about some stakeholders and sometimes do a better job about including those stakeholders than other times. And so, yeah, I think for me, peace engineering has really helped. It's provided an actual program that kind of validates my interest in engineering, and then also tools and stuff that we can actually bring into other workspaces. So I didn't really know what I wanted to talk about here, but for my experiential learning, I worked with this organization that does technical stuff in refugee camp in Greece. And I think there it was really important that we had this kind of conflict sensitive approach, because in the humanitarian world, you go by this do no harm. But how do you know what harm is if you've never talked to people, if you don't understand maybe other contexts, especially when you're working in engineering settings that are not in your backyard? I understand Philly pretty well, but even I don't understand all the communities in Philly. And then you go to an entirely new place with entirely different contexts. And then the other project that Mira mentioned is this thinking about the cascading consequences of conflict on civilians. And there, I think engineering is going to be such an important tool, because we need ways of actually approaching these really big problems with some sort of rigor, and how we define rigor is super important there. Engineers for a long time defined rigor as quantitative assessments and things that you could put numbers behind. And I think we're starting to see some changes there, and we need more changes in bringing more people into that. So I think that one of the ways that peace engineering helped me kind of approach that project is I never once questioned the value of different types of data and different types of sources for information in the way that maybe some other traditional engineers might look at that. And obviously we need to take note of where we can apply numbers, because that can hopefully help provide some rigor in some ways and produce kind of affect change with it. But also ways in which we can maybe include some non-traditional data. And then it was also, I think you approach projects much more humbly after that. You no longer go into the room as an engineer and think that you have the most expertise. It's a much more equal, I would say, approach of, especially I'm not an expert in civilian harm, I have an engineering background. And so I can kind of think a little bit more linearly and try and develop tools that we could apply to civilian harm, but I'm not an expert in that field. And so just really approaching that humbly and coming in and say, well, how can I help you? Let me really figure out how I can understand this problem from your perspective. What are your needs? What are your kind of barriers to entry and all of that stuff? And that's not easy to do. But I think being able to go into those situations more humbly and kind of knowing that those are barriers that are going to come up kind of really helps help that process go forward. And I think helps my own work right now. Sustainability is a process of trade-offs. And so sometimes you go into an engineering room and engineers are overwhelmed because, oh, now you have to talk to the community, and will the community want something that you didn't even consider, and all that stuff. And so it's just really helpful, I think, to just know that that's okay. That's actually normal. That means that we're probably going to do our jobs better, because the outcome is actually going to be more reflective of the needs of society or the community or wherever you're working. So, yeah.
Savannah, I would like to ask you something, because about what all have you said about like having a more human approach to problems. This just get me in mind having like quantitative but also qualitative research methods. And I would really like to ask this, because this is one of the jobs I have in my life, and is how you should include these qualitative research methods and also data results in your equation to make it, you know, like you have to keep it objective, but you have to also include the human behavior, the cultural aspect, and different, you know, like aspects of humanity. I don't know if you have like any experience or any like example to just make this clear.
I mean, I think that I'm learning just like everybody else, and I don't think that this has been done a ton well, which makes it challenging. Oh, sorry, I was going to say something and then it went from my head. I think our science is maybe less traditional science is maybe less objective than we've thought in the past. And so I think that can, like, we should obviously trust science and traditional science that's done in a laboratory and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, I think every single project has all of these qualitative influences on it. And so understanding that then I think allows for more inclusion of those maybe more qualitative things. Then it comes into like what kind of modeling you're doing and like the actual ability to include the qualitative stuff with the quantitative. But I think even just qualitatively thinking about things at the very beginning of a project in the design phase can shift how you think about an entire project. So I think like in the future, we need to get better at including different types of data together. But I think for engineers, like the masses of engineering right now, I think including just some qualitative thinking at the very beginning of projects can vastly alter how projects actually, the project outcome. And then I think we need to get much better about declaring assumptions that are behind a lot of our work and getting better about even thinking about what assumptions we're putting into our work. Like if you're trained as a specific type of engineer, 20 years down the line, you might even not remember all the assumptions that you're making because you've just been trained this way for 20 years. So I think as those start to become more clear, then we can expand the bucket easier to include qualitative data, because it's there and it's influencing things regardless of if we're incorporating it well into whatever we're trying to include. But yeah, I don't, that's probably not a good answer, but
I just want to add that, Maria, that's a really good point. As we were building our curriculum, we knew enough to make sure that we had required courses in both quantitative data analysis and qualitative data analysis. And that was like the easiest first step. And of course, the hard stuff is, well, how do you integrate those? How do you actually use data and information from different types of sources and integrate that? And so that's a lot of our work.
And I will just say too, so we take a systems engineering class, and I think systems engineering is so cool because it really like just expands what you're thinking about from the beginning. But even our professor there, we started with a very like, okay, we're going to find a case study that we can put numbers behind and we're going to get an output. And then about halfway through, we were like, we actually just can't find numbers for this. Like the data just doesn't exist yet. And so I think it's really important to kind of be aware that those numbers might not exist, but qualitative thinking can then help us put those quantitative numbers. And sometimes the qualitative is just as good, if not better, than the quantitative. And that was coming from like a quantitative engineering professor and stuff. So that was an interesting lesson that we all kind of learned together.
Thank you so much. I don't know if anyone wants to introduce themselves.
We'll call on Aaron to go next if you want to.
Sure, I'll go next. Like I said earlier, I'm currently in Drexel's Peace Engineering program. And my current work, I'm currently doing my experiential learning right now. Like Savannah said, her experiential learning, she worked in a refugee camp in Greece. So mine is a little bit closer to home. I'm working with a professor at Drexel. His name is Dr. Joseph Hughes. And we're doing research on gun violence in Philadelphia. And it's a really interesting project because, you know, in the United States, guns are so integral in our culture. Like, I mean, there's very few countries in the world that have the right to bear arms in their constitution. And so that is why it's so prevalent, why guns are so prevalent here, and part of the problem of why there's so much gun violence. And so we're working with multiple stakeholders, including the Pennsylvania Department of Health, and then another state organization called the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency. And so they are just two state organizations that are focused on, collecting data, doing research, and just trying to find ways to find a solution to the conflict of gun violence in our state. And as engineers, our work with them is to collect and unify the sources of data that they all have. There's multiple databases involved. And then to use that data, and we're doing something like Savannah brought it up, she brought up systems engineering. We're actually creating a systems map of gun violence, or trying to, and it would, as far as we know, it would be the first of its kind. We've done our research and we haven't been able to find a systems map of gun violence yet. And doing those things would make future gun violence research easier and make it easier to find solutions to the problem. And then recently, we have formed a relationship with the Boston University School of Public Health. And their research is focused on facilitating dialogue between gun owners and non-gun owners to try and create a policy platform that both sides can support to help push gun reform and to just try and reduce the amount of gun violence.
What is very interesting in what you said, and that I think is something we should remark about peace engineering, is that, well, like engineers, we are supposed to be like the expert scientists who are meant to, solve everything and just figure out a way to save lives. But we don't kind of consider that people involved, people that are struggling to get, through these problems, they have enough expertise as well, and they can just become, our partners, not our, not like we are trying to solve their lives, but they already know a lot of things, and we should consider them as partners, as stakeholders, not as clients,
Yeah, we really do view the State Department of Health and the Commission on Crime and Delinquency. They're really the stakeholders here, and we're really working for them. And the reason we started the project was because for the data analysis part, because that's really where engineers can come in. And it was really shocking to see the level of data that is available on gun violence in Pennsylvania and the United States in general. It's very limited, and there's so many different databases from many different organizations. The Pennsylvania Department of Health has their own database. The the Commission on Crime and Delinquency has their own database. Every county in Pennsylvania, their police department has their own database. So there's dozens and dozens, and none of them match up, and they all take data in different ways. So that's really where we came in the beginning, was to start trying to unify those databases into something cohesive and actually useful.
I think another interesting thing is that once you start building that systems map of what all the influences are on gun violence, sometimes it's a technical trigger that's going to be the silver bullet that helps solve a problem, and sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's policy driven, or sometimes it's an economic incentive. And so once you see all the connections, you're able to identify those. So really important to identify in this case that likely a policy intervention is going to be able to shift something within the system. And so for that to be effective, or to even have any chance of moving forward, you're going to have a participatory process that brings both people who can either promote something or keep it from passing through. So that's a really important part of sort of mapping out the whole system.
So who should go next?
I think we'll hear from Elliot.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mira, is this a good time to share a couple slides, or are we waiting for later for that?
Okay. Go for it, Gina. Yeah, you can present.
Yeah, I think I can figure it out. All right. Can you see that, Mira?
Yep, we're good.
All right, perfect. So yeah, just to introduce myself again really quick. My name's Elliot. I'm a student at Drexel University pursuing a undergraduate degree in engineering, also in the Peace Engineering program. Fairly new addition to the program. I joined back in April. My interests and experience are really in anything to do with Internet of Things technology, as well as sort of forest protection and management. And a really cool part of the Peace Engineering program is that I've been able to bring in a company that I've been working to start sort of as a experiential learning component of the program. So I'm the co-founder of a company called Outland Analytics, and we're working to roll out a system which provides real-time alerts of illegal logging in forests. So we're really working to provide a system that sort of in general is a way of monitoring any sort of remote natural area for any unwanted activity, and especially within the large international problem of illegal logging and forest degradation. So this for me really fit well into the sort of peace engineering scheme, specifically in sort of what Savannah and Mira were discussing in qualitative data. So within sort of the lean startup methodology, there's this thing called customer discovery. And it's the process of really going out into the field and talking with stakeholders to a problem and not engaging in development of a solution or a product until you've done that. And there's actually my company was able to go through a few programs that were business accelerators that were solely geared towards engineers that were bringing products to market. And the interesting part of these programs was the whole purpose was to stop the engineer from building a solution before they went out in the field. And really at the end of the day, just spoke with people and gathered qualitative information about problems on the ground. So that just like we were saying before, they're not bringing sort of assumptions in. So this for me has been a really interesting process because I'm interested in bridging that sort of problem and solution, and especially engaging stakeholders. I found that that translated very well to sort of the whole peace engineering process. So just to get a little more into the partner organization I've been working with, as I said, it's actually a startup I've been working to launch called Outland Analytics. And basically, we provide a acoustic forest monitoring platform. And this uses sensors that we deploy in forests or in other remote areas. And they're constantly listening for things like vehicles or chainsaws with onboard microphones. And they then provide real-time alerts of this activity so that someone can ideally respond sort of instantly to illegal logging in a remote area. So we've developed an initial product, and we're in the process of sort of working with early adopter customers. So right now we're working in the United States with the Bureau of Land Management, which is a federal agency within the US Department of the Interior, as well as the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation, and the New Jersey Division of Parks and Forestry is a very new addition to sort of our pilot program. But this has been a really interesting process for me because I came in with some experience of sort of gathering qualitative data, engaging with stakeholders. And this has been really important throughout this process for me because it is not easy to bring a product into sort of the governmental space, especially a new technology, sort of a very different way of monitoring forests in remote areas. And it takes a lot of understanding of the problem and the people involved in that problem before you can really roll anything out the door. Then I think with peace engineering, the perspective I've gotten from that is to really look even broader within that area of the problem. So illegal logging is a massive issue across the world. It's a $152 billion black market, according to Interpol. So when we talk about solutions to illegal logging, we could talk about export and import regulations. We could talk about budgeting within the US Forest Service. We could talk about on-the-ground security technologies. So it's one thing to understand fully sort of the solution or the piece of the solution that you're operating in, but I think it's also really important that I've learned through this peace engineering program is to really include and understand the broader problem. So we may be working on an on-the-ground technology, but where does that fit into the greater ecosystem of sort of the conflict around forests, whether that's, poverty or land rights or land ownership? And I think that's been really interesting and related to some work I've been doing recently with Mira, sort of, as I said, broadening out my understanding of sort of forestry, forest crime, forest conflict, so I can really understand where a solution like this, that at the end of the day is more of a security monitoring solution, fits into the more policy solutions that are needed to combat a problem such as illegal logging. And with that, I'd be happy to take any questions. And if anyone would want to discuss anything here offline, my email has been in the lower left-hand corner of my slides.
I think that would be great. I think a lot of people would like to get to know a little bit more about your project. And when you are talking about, like facing these kind of problems and enhance, not only ecosystem quality, but people's livelihood using technology. I also have a little question about how you use like a common language, because I think that's sometimes a big, boundary, a big limit when we are talking as engineers. I don't know if you have any clarifications or notes about this.
Do you mean in terms of sort of just communication with various people within sort of the sector we operate in?
Yeah, and get to, to make them understand how your project is gonna, impact the ecosystem and the system by itself, and as well, like to get them involved, because as we said already, we need people's collaboration to get to make a great impact.
Yeah, I think the way we approached it in terms of sort of communicating with people and trying to, I guess I'll start with just get them on board with sort of a new solution, is I think it goes back to a lot of just having conversations with people in the beginning to really understand their problem, so that you can sort of frame your solution within the context that they already understand. So specifically within the US federal government, we found that really important because in the US, we have forest rangers who are very sort of, they have processes that they are very used to. And we can't just sort of interject a solution into that. That just wouldn't work. Really, we need to understand everything that they do, have a respect for that, and then present our solution in a way that might complement their sort of current activities. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
I'll say that's always a challenge in working across disciplines and coming up with a consistent language. Savannah can probably talk for hours about this, but one of the first meetings that we had with both academics and practitioners who work on protecting civilians in conflict. So they were meeting with engineers and social scientists and people with just different backgrounds. And at one point we were talking about clouds and stopped after a couple minutes and realized that half the room was thinking of computing cloud storage, and half the room was thinking about like weather clouds, where precipitation comes from. So just building that common language, that's a funny example, but building that common language so that we each know that we're working for the same things is not trivial.
It's not. I actually have some questions from the people who are watching us now that is related to us. So anyone who thinks has the answer or a note, I will encourage to do so. So the question is, as I said, related to what we were talking about, and it's how to guide engineers to be humble and recognize that communities also have the knowledge and that they can contribute to the practice of engineering and design. So what do you think, guys, about? Because, sometimes as engineers, we are thought to be, I hate to say this, but, we are thought to be superior in some way, to believe we have the answer. And this is exactly what is not working right now. So what do you think? How we can change our mindsets?
Well, I'll let other people take it too, but I think a lot of people have been burned the hard way. So they've designed something to completely fine technical specs, gone and built it, and then been really honestly confused why it's not being used. It was not responsive to what people wanted or where they wanted to access it or how they wanted to use it. And so I think a lot of people and a lot of failed technologies and engineering projects have taught people lessons like that the hard way. We're trying to avoid that by just trying to introduce that into the engineering curriculum so it's part of the consideration process early on, so that you don't have to, so that your training is not entirely to build up your technical knowledge and make you feel like that's the only thing that's important, so that you fail to consider all the other factors. But I think a lot of people have learned that the hard way. So our goal is to try to introduce that much, much earlier.
I was going to say the same thing. It's not maybe nice, but I think that there are so many case studies of like just engineering gone wrong, both in the design didn't actually work, but then in the impact that failed design has had. Yeah, just, I mean, from a sustainability point of view, if you are building a product that then nobody uses, now you're using environmental resources that didn't need to be used in the first place. And so then you're contributing to this like broader issue of resource consumption, and that's harm in its own way. And then obviously if you build something and it collapses, then that's a whole other different kind of harm. But like, I remember one of my first engineering classes, we talked about engineering failure, and we got like the example of the bridge that like moved like this because it was designed whatever, but we don't actually get examples in our engineering curriculum of like the engineer didn't listen, or yeah, like I didn't get that until much later in my engineering curriculum. And I think that really helped shift, I mean, my own viewpoint. And then I think it's also about encouraging engineers to be inquisitive. I've sat in all too many engineering classrooms where you're expected to like regurgitate exactly what the professor thinks and the values, and you're supposed to come up with an economic feasibility study of whatever you're doing, and then you're asking about the impact of things, and you're not really taught that you should be asking those things. And then even when you want to ask them, it's a little bit like, no, maybe we shouldn't be asking those things. So I think a lot of this, like if you just allow people to be creative and bring in their own perspectives on things and be humans as well as engineers, I think that that's another approach. But that takes, integrating into systems and all that. So it's not an easy solution, but.
And it takes a more diverse engineering student body as well. So you need to first have those perspectives in the classroom, and then welcome them and invite them and incorporate them. So lots of work to do.
A lot of work.
One just quick thing I would add is, in my experience of sort of learning about some of those processes, how to sort of work with them in tandem with engineering, I am a big fan of sort of just courses and boot camps that take you through that. That's sort of a very common thing, especially in the startup world. And sort of the incentive there is sort of exactly what Mira was sort of talking about, is failed companies that have to make massive pivots, companies that started by building satellites and now are doing solely data analytics. So sort of some of these examples of huge pivots because people didn't listen, and mixed with sort of just training, maybe a little forced sometimes, of sort of, going out and talking to people before you start building. You can't touch your soldering iron until you talk to 20 people. I think that's really important when people are building things, whether they're products from a company or solutions coming out of a government.
Yeah, I will say also like multidisciplinary, teamwork helps a lot when you start getting some different points of view. You start seeing your system, the one you design, is not working from a sociological point of view, and then you realize you don't have all the answers, and that you really need some other people that are expert in other stuff. Maybe you, as engineer, you don't consider as important as yours, but at the end they are like more important, or the same importance than yours. Yeah. So we have our last guest, who is gonna introduce himself. Please go ahead.
Is that me?
I think now we do.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Okay, well, my name is Camilo Navarro. I don't know if I have seen you before. I really know I have seen Myra in a few conferences. I just wanted to say that 6 years ago, when I finished my master's, I really dream about doing a peace engineering master's. But back then, in 2014, there were not a side of a peace engineering masters. So what I want to tell you is that in a way, I feel like you're living that dream that I couldn't live just 6 years ago. But I had the opportunity of doing a peace building masters, not a peace engineering masters. And I am really pleased to hear the results of what you are doing in Philadelphia and Drexel. I'm really glad to hear the experience you have, what Savannah is doing, what Elliot is doing, what Aaron is sharing with the Pennsylvania guns, and me too. I work with both qualitative and quantitative data and the synergy between them, and those questions that Maria was asking you are questions that are very often asked to me. And I just wanted to share something with you, is that when I go to work with a community, when I'm doing an engineering intervention with a peace building community, there's always questions about why an engineer is doing this. Like, it's not in the mindset of people having an engineer interesting, understanding different perspectives about a problem, interesting in helping creating safe dialogue spaces to uh, uh, share different ideas and solve possible conflicts and help create agreements. And those are things, are tools and skills that are not taught in classic engineering curriculum. And maybe just by having these spaces of dialogue, we can start this this new emerging field that is peace engineering, uh, bringing closer or experience and that knowledge from different projects that we have been working on. Just to share a little bit with you, I have been part of Engineers Without Borders for 7 years, and I work with humanitarian engineering in Colombia and grassroots engineering in Brazil. And in a way, I have my own particular definition of what peace engineering is. For me, it brings a little bit of all these other engineering praxis, if you want to call it, and you have very like the most humanitarian. This word is a little difficult because you have this paternalist approach, but this engineering for good, like all these different praxis have this idea of doing good and contribute. And the thing is, when you're an engineer, this idea of contribute can sometimes take you to the wrong way. Maybe you can come with good intentions, you can put your knowledge and trying to help people, and your help sometimes is not even needed. I presented my PhD proposal a couple of weeks ago, and one of the jurors asked me about the role of engineers in the world, and he asked me, like, we see engineers everywhere, and now with this new emerging field of peace engineering, we will be seeing more and more engineers working with the peace building communities. Don't you think that we could leave that to other professions as psychologists or social workers or anthropologists. And for me, it was clear that we have something to bring, that we can put our skills and our tools to help those communities. But the question is really important, because sometimes, even if we want to, we have this idea of doing good, of contribute, sometimes is not needed. And that's why it's so important to listen, to have all this perspective, this paradigmatic or multi-paradigmatic approach to really value what everything can bring to the table in what are like really complex social system. And bringing our technical skills, they can be even worse. They can be socio-technical complex systems. So sometimes we can bring even more noise to that already very complex world that is a peace building community, or a community that have a lot of problems. But again, I'm just really happy to be here today. Thank you, Laura and Maria, for the invitation, and I'm really glad to hear everything that you guys are doing in Drexel. You're very fortunate. I tell you, this, like 6 years ago, that will be my dream to be part of this program. So I hope you know that.
Well, I think we all do the same work. So whether you come at it from peace engineering or peace building with an engineering background. So congrats on your PhD proposal. I was thinking as you were talking that I sometimes get corrected by a colleague in social science when I say, you know, we're trying to figure out what the role of engineering is in this complex situation. And she says, first you have to ask if, because sometimes it's not an engineering solution that is the right solution. And I think we have to understand and acknowledge that. But a lot of times, eventually, concrete is poured, wires are connected, and an engineer who understands the peace building that goes into that that's coming out of that community is going to do a better job with that. So they might just be, you know, a contractor brought in at the end, but still that contextual understanding of what the impact of whatever that engineering intervention is going to be much more responsive. So, you know, I think that there is value in having engineers work in peace building, and that there's also value in having peace builders work in engineering. And not that an engineering solution is always what you need in a peace building community, or that a peace building solution is what you need in an engineering firm, but just that in that they are going to eventually overlap. Having people part of the discussions earlier on is going to lead to better outcomes. But I think it's an important question that you raised.
Yeah, just like Maria said before, the synergy between that can emerge of a multidisciplinary team, it helps have different perspectives and understand different paradigms about a single problem, and then be aware about the framework in which you can actually make your intervention, so that you're not increasing without knowing the problem that is already there.
Okay, so there's another question from the audience. Okay, it's good that, you know, like everyone is trying to reflect about our role and trying to figure out new questions and new ways to approach to problems. But all of this has been led because we had, you know, going through a bachelor degree, and we had, you know, some basis. So the question is, peace engineering is a topic that is discussed in graduate school and professional practice. How could we promote and motivate these reflections in early years of study of all engineering bachelors, or even to people that, you know, doesn't really think about going to college or going through university?
Is that a question for me? I think the participation in discussions that affect any community is important at any stage. So whether you're, a child in the community, so bringing voices into any decision making is so important. So I think that process, and that's a very peace engineering approach, is important in any either level of education or even outside of educational systems. I think you bring up a good point in sort of like the structure of engineering education as it exists now, and that we don't often bring this up early enough. So I think I tend to see students when they're towards the end of their careers and they're having crises because they went into engineering because they wanted to save the world or meet the needs of society, and then we present them with a very technical curriculum that is kind of removed from how people would be using it or the needs of society or even the social value of the engineering. And so it becomes very hard to align your personal interests with your technical skills at some point, unless you work very hard to merge them. So that's something that we need to do earlier on in engineering education. Why we particularly started with a master's is that the peace building community were looking for people with an already established set of technical skills. So that seemed like it was better to start with graduates of an engineering program and, sort of give them the peace building skills to work well in there. But I think you're absolutely right that needs to be incorporated in earlier. So I don't know if anyone else wants to add. We've all gone through engineering, or many of us have gone through engineering programs. What was missing and what should have been there that would have, been more satisfying in pursuing that career?
I mean, I always say that I wouldn't have made it through a traditional engineering program because I was lucky enough that I was kind of asking those questions earlier on and just didn't, before finding the avenue that I did, I was just that disconnect between my values and the engineering discipline seemed too great at the time for like early on in my undergraduate studies to kind of grapple with. And so thankfully I found people in the community to have those conversations with and develop my skills. But I also think that it's also a conversation about who has access to education in general and what kind of education. And I don't know what James's title is now, but one of the other directors of the peace engineering program, was it last year or the year before, we went and we talked at a junior school. So it was really young kids and talking about different kinds of engineering. And so I think it's kind of difficult because, those of us that want to bridge these things, it already feels like there's so much work to do in doing this kind of good engineering or contextual engineering. But I think the onus is also a little bit on us, and we have to be advocates for this kind of work. And we have to develop a bank of case studies to further advocate for our work. And, we not only have to convince traditional engineering discipline people, but we also have to go out of our way a little bit to talk with other people who are interested in engineering or in higher education and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think it's kind of both things. I think in terms of engineering education, if you're already in an undergraduate degree program, I think that we had a workshop at Drexel. It wasn't a workshop, but it was a talk about how to better incorporate values into engineering classes, I think. And it was from somebody in the engineering for social justice and peace world. And even before asking people to maybe shift their values to a more social justice lens, you have to first get students to think about, well, what are their values, which currently we don't do. We all come to academics with our own set of values and ethics, but if we don't actually think about them, then we're definitely not going to think about them and how they apply to our work. So I think that's one way that if you get professor kind of input or willingness to engage on that, then they can start it as early as your first kind of engineering classes and getting you to ask those questions. Yeah,
I'd say it's a rare engineering classroom that really takes the time to get to know what each of the students brings in their values. It's more a one-way delivery of information. And so that is a change in approach in how we even teach engineering.
Definitely. Yeah. I have also pursued an engineering bachelor degree, as I told you before. And well, at the beginning, I thought I would never have the opportunity to talk to people, and that really frustrated me. And it's because how the curriculum is made. You know, like you got to go through a lot of math and chemistry classes, but you never see the people who are involved, the people that is really encouraging you to get better, to do your job at your best. And I will say sometimes when we are in the middle of the bachelor degree, we kind of lost our track because we don't see this. It becomes invisible. And I think like most engineers have their initial dream of changing people's lives, and that's why we get into this major at the beginning. But then we get like overwhelmed with all these chemistry and math and just being there and do some assignment and not being able to talk to anybody. Yeah, so I think definitely the way we think about engineers should change. We should also promote that engineering is a tool to enhance people's lives, to promote peace, to bring a more fair world. I know it's a little bit romantic definition, but I think that's the way we can, just change the way how people see us, and the way also how we're gonna look through people. I think Laura wants to say something.
Yeah. Yeah. I really feel like I love all this topic. Since 2017 that I have the chance to meet Mira Olson, I really fell in love with my career because before it, I was so frustrated with my studies. And when I met all these people who has been working in peace engineering, I really fell in love with this, and it's my dream maybe someday to study the peace engineering program at Drexel if they receive me there, of course. And that's why I founded CIAP Kiwe, and that's why we are also working in peace engineering and in ethics in engineering, because we really believe in the power of engineering in transforming lives. And that's why we are starting a project right now named Proyecto Alma. In English, it is Soul Project, something like that. And it's so related with the topic of today, because it's about bringing community partnership into engineering education and how we can have this model of working with community with the help of a foundation that have a lot of work in the territories, and how the university can approach to them, bringing them tools and opportunities, and maybe co-working with them to show and bring some solutions. And I really appreciate Mira to accept the invitation of being here today, because she's a so inspiring woman, and I must say it, since I've met her in 2017 in Build Up, I felt very inspired by her, and also for James and maybe Craig Saylor and Jerry McCann, which I don't know how to say this, but I really feel like very I forgot the word even in Spanish. Sorry, this happens to me a lot. I really feel good, because I must say that I consider them like very inspiring people around the world, and I am very happy and to have the chance to chat with them, because there is a lot of students in engineering right now that does not have this opportunity. And I think that having these participatory dialogue sessions that can amplify the view of the engineering is very helpful for engineers who are studying right now and feel frustrated for their careers, and see the way another people is working in engineering, and another chance to continue with engineering with a lot of heart. And in Spanish, I don't know how to translate this word, maybe Maria can help me. is a word by Orlando Falsborda, that is sentipensante, and I don't know how to translate it, but it's thinking with the heart and also with the brain. And I think that this combination that peace engineer brings to the students about that sentipensar is very inspiring, because it shows that you can do engineering with heart. And I think that is a very good approach. And I think that the curriculum of the peace engineering program really brings that to the discussion in engineering education.
Well, I'll just flip that around and say that my experience in those early meetings with Laura and Camilo and Felipe is that we were at the stage where we were just starting to think about how to teach peace engineering. And I met them at various conferences and realized that they were already doing it. And so our job becomes just amplifying your work and showing you're the inspiration for the students who can go out and see how it looks in the real world. So how they can be both engineers. I like your working with the heart and the brain. That's what people want to do. And you've figured out this way to combine the two of those. So my experience was very much in admiration of the work that you're already doing.
Well,
I just wanted, no, go ahead.
no, I think that yes, but I just believe that I was working in peace engineering when I met all of you, and I was secure that I was going through the right path when I met you, and that's why you are so inspiring to me. I know that maybe sometimes we are doing a lot of things, but we do not believe that inside us, and I think that's why I think that meeting all of you bring me that inspiration, and that's why maybe CIAP Kiwe was born, and we are right now in a space created by Yuma Kiwe, and a space that has María, which is a great environmental engineering and also a great designer, and there's a lot of people who is putting their hearts in this, and I am really in love with all these topics, and I must stop right now.
Thanks, Laura. I just wanted to say that just as well as Laura, back in the days when I have this willing to contribute to these peace building communities that in the moment I didn't even know how to call them, but just communities that were victim of conflict in Colombia, and to see you, I remember very well a build up conference that was held in Universidad de los Andes in Bogota, and seeing that there were engineers trying to do this and trying to bring that into engineering curricula and teach other students, and really trying to create this new field, this new praxis of engineers was very inspired. Once that I heard that the peace building masters was created in Philadelphia, I was really happy, because just as Laura said, I didn't have I was not certain that there was a path. Once it started to take form and have actually a curriculum, have students and have people graduating from these programs, now I see that there is actually a path, and this path is not formed yet. It's in the early stages of forming, and I'm really glad to be able to be a part of, and to be able to share these spaces with you all, Mira, and also your students, and with Maria and Laura. So thank you so much.
So when you're talking about changing the way we see engineering, is also another question that is regarding about this, and is how academia can, just work together with society and, make a better world. So there is a question from the audience related to this. I don't know if you guys have listened of what is going on here in Colombia with the leadership, with the leaders, the social leaders, environmental leaders. Okay, there have been, they had been assassinated and killed during these last years, which is a pity. So, based on your experience in peace engineering, and taking into account this context of this Colombian political context I have already mentioned, how do you think peace engineering and engineering projects could transform our reality, our political reality, and allow us to empower back again the leaders and to keep them safe, to just make them feel they are support enough to go on with their own ideals. I don't know if you one of you guys want to answer this question.
Well, I really advocate for a partnered approach for university research in general. I'm trying to pivot that as the model for all of our work, that it is partnered with governments or agencies or NGOs at all levels. And actually, some of the first work that I saw in that did come out of Colombia, come out of University de los Andes, where faculty in engineering were working on modeling the new legal systems. And so that's the kind of approach that I'm trying to build, but learned largely from you.
I think you're talking about the model that was created for the HEP, for the special justice for the peace process, that was created by Camilo Olaya.
Right.
It was created from systemic thinking and system dynamics to help and support the peace process that we believe was coming or was in their early stages. But I have to say that even if there were very good intentions there in using engineering tools to support this peace building process in the early stages, I believe that the tool that was developed from Camilo and from the University of Los Andes was not as good as it could be, because it didn't take into account all these early stages of all these qualitative data, all these multi-paradigms, all these perspectives. And once the HEP, the Special Justice for the Peace Process, started, the judges and the people who were working there, they didn't actually use the tool as they should, because there was this thing that was not there, this lack of I will say legitimacy of the tool that was created by the engineers. And the way that I believe we can create the legitimacy to assure the continuity of the use of the tools and skills that we can bring from engineering is by involving in a participatory way all the different stakeholders, and that are the approach that you're using in Drexel.
Yeah, it's definitely hard. And even the timelines at which people work in government versus academia versus industry, getting all that to line up, and that's just logistic stuff. So it's definitely a struggle, and it's a change in how we've normally operated. And so you need not only just participatory efforts on everyone, but sort of an understanding that academic research is going to move at a different pace, or that governments are going to be more willing to share data, or they're going to hear different voices. So it's a change on the part of all participants, but I think you're right that that's the way that you're going to end up with effective tools that are actually used and responsive. It's not easy.
Yeah, I think it should be a collective work from both society, academia, as you said, like government, policymakers, because everyone is a stakeholder in peace building. So yeah, everyone has their own role.
Well said.
well, I think that's all the questions we have until now. I would really like to thank all of you guys. All the things you have shared with us, they are very valuable, and we really appreciate you have been here. We are really honored to get to know you, and of course, we would like to work collectively with you if it's possible someday. And as I said before, we are big fans of Peace Engineering program. We would like also to promote our local and own way to create peace engineering here in Colombia. And well, you are kind of our mentors to make this real. Thank you very much. And I don't know if anyone would like to say anything else, to add any information, any details. But
I just want to say thank you so much for having all of us on. And I said this before we started talking, but like, this is the kind of community that I'm really excited that we get to chat and kind of build our own peace engineering community, because there are engineers that are out there that are already doing this, and that's where the peace engineering program came from. And just as we all kind of figure out what the track is after we graduate, or after we're just moving forward in what we're doing, and building our own community and sharing, I think is just really exciting to get to talk to everybody and learn from other people. So so just thanks for having us on. And I'm really looking forward to staying connected after this. So thanks for inviting me, Mira.
Agreed. Yeah, thanks for creating this space and this opportunity to all learn from each other.
Yeah, thank you so much for being here. We will really like to continue chatting with you, and maybe have some projects, USA and Colombia. So see you in the next time. And I think that for now it's okay. I don't know if Maria wants to say something to close the space.
yeah, I think these kind of spaces are necessary and required to make people think about the role of applied science, but also to get to understand what engineering really is about, and how can everyone, no matter what the discipline they have, they can be either psychologists, designers, artists, but they can contribute to this peace building. Because well, it's a huge mission, it's very challenging, and we will need everyone to come up and just make collective ideas. I'm very thankful to get to know you all of you guys. I hope this kind of send a good message to engineers that are pursuing right now a bachelor degree or a master degree, to at least make them reflect about their role in our society. And well, I think this is like the first step to get people to know how we can collectively change the world. So thank you. As I said before, thank you so much for sharing this with us. Well, I think that's it. And well, we will stay connected. So hope you have a good evening.
Thank
All of
you,
you guys.
too.
Good evening,
You too.
everyone.
Bye.
And good luck with
Bye,
all your
guys.
projects.
Thank
Ciao,
you.
ciao.
Bye.
You too.
Bye
Thank you.
bye.